Remember in our previous Herald guide where I said it was easily one of the best builds in the game?
Did I? I didn't realize that.
What if I told you after that, Herald got some of the most generous buffs I've ever seen for a single class?
Okay.
Now, what if I told you could provide permanent quickness, might, fury, swiftness, vigor, and protection to your team with full DPS gear and still be rocking a fat 40% boon duration? Well, then buckle up, Herald enjoyers. It only gets better from here. Welcome back, everyone. The time has come to revisit the almighty Quickness Herald. Back in the June balance patch, the way Herald applied quickness got a massive rework. It used to be that you would only ever apply quickness when you'd consume one of your facets in Glint when combined with the trait Draconic Echo. This meant that you could only apply quickness when you were in Glint and that you more or less had to spam all your facets off cooldown. Now, however, instead of applying quickness when you consume a facet, you now pulse quickness whenever you're consuming 6 or more points of energy. To put it simply, when this arrow is pointing to the left and your energy is decreasing, you pulse quickness. What this means is, instead of only applying quickness when you're in Glint, you can now do it in every legend. This extra flexibility, combined with some of the other changes to Herald, which means you don't need to run any extra concentration gear, has made this build better than ever. With how easy it is to provide insane levels of boon coverage, how durable you are, how much CC you offer, and how simple this build is to play and gear, this is, in my opinion, the single best offensive quickness build in the game. First up, let's go over some of the Herald Basics. Herald is an elite specialization of the Revenant class and gives you access to the Glint Legend. Here, you can use your new facet skills to support your team. These skills you can toggle on once to pulse boons around you. You can then consume them to get access to powerful active effects in exchange for giving up some of these nice passive effects. Your facets also cost different amounts of energy to keep these passive effects pulsing. This means that you can have multiple passives triggering at the same time, and if you're consuming more than 6 points of energy at once, you'll pulse quickness to yourself and nearby allies due to the trait Elevated Compassion in the Herald line. This trait makes today's entire build function. These facets and your traits in the Herald line combine to let you provide permanent quickness, 20 stacks of might, fury, swiftness, vigor, and protection to your subgroup. You can also add in some regeneration for good measure if you want. Now, let's touch on our weapons. For our weapons, we'll be using 2 swords as our best DPS option, and unless you need CC, this is where you'll be spending all of your time. Sword auto attacks simply offer good damage and apply vulnerability. Sword 2 strikes enemies around you, chills enemies, and deals bonus damage if it only hits one enemy. Sword 3 will make you shadow step around nearby foes, give you a 1.5 second evade, and grant you might on every strike. Sword 4 applies 8 stacks of vulnerability, does outstanding strike damage, and immobilizes enemies, which lasts for longer the more targets you hit. Sword 5 will shadow step you to your enemy, grant 8 seconds of fury, and if it hits, will deliver a second strike. This skill can also be used to teleport closer to enemies when outside of range. If you run anything that is even tangentially related to Power Revenant in PvE, you're probably going to be running Staff. Our auto attack will just apply some strike damage and heal nearby allies on the first strike. Staff 2 will apply weakness, some damage, and heal nearby allies. This heals for even more if you manage to hit an enemy. Staff 3 gives you a 2-second block, which can be an absolute lifesaver and save you from wasting a dodge. It also blinds enemies at the end of the cast for good measure. Staff 4 will heal allies around you as well as remove 2 conditions. It's also a blast finisher, so you can nab some sweet combo finishes. Staff 5 is why you're bringing Staff. You charge forward, attack 9 times, knock back enemies on each strike, and you even evade while charging forward, just for a bit of extra value. If you manage to land all 9 attacks, you will do a catastrophic 1350 break bar damage. This lets you carry your entire team when it comes to break bars. The main 2 legends that we're going to take are Glint and Shiro. These will give us the highest possible damage while providing quickness. Depending on the encounter, Shiro can be swapped out for some of your other legends depending on the utility you need. We'll go through some of the specific use cases as we chat about each legend. Every skill while in Glint is a facet skill. Facet of Nature is a massively loaded skill. and has different effects depending on your current legend. There's a lot to cover here, so for now, I'll just focus on the effects that are relevant to Power Quickness Herald. The passive effect while in Glint will grant you an extra flat 20% duration to any boons you apply. This is on top of the standard 100% boon duration cap. When you consume Facet of Nature while in Glint, it will increase the duration of all your allies' boons by 2 seconds. This will go up to 3 seconds once we buff it with a trait. When we consume this facet, we'll generally always want to do so when we're in Glint for this massive increase in boon duration. The passive effect in Jealous will reduce incoming damage to allies by 10%. This is separate to protection and the 10% damage reduction you get from certain ascended boons. If you consume this facet while you're in Jealous, you'll grant 2 stacks of stability to your allies, however you'll generally use Inspiring Reinforcement for this. The passive effect for Facet of Light will pulse regeneration to nearby allies, a very useful boon to have. Consuming this will let you ignore all incoming damage and convert it all to healing. You can use this to just flat out ignore mechanics like the Mind Crush on Deimos. The passive effect of Facet of Strength will pulse might to nearby allies. When you consume it, you'll attack twice, grant yourself a 15% damage modifier for 10 seconds, and when we come to the rotation, we'll want to maximize the uptime of this buff as much as possible. Facet of Elements will pulse swiftness around you while you have it active, and after you consume it, you'll lay down an AoE attack that pulses weakness, chilled, and burning, a very nice damaging skill. Facet of Darkness will pulse fury every few seconds, and when you consume it, you'll blind enemies, reveal them, and break stun on yourself. No damage on this skill, but it does have some nice utility, especially with that stun break. Facet of Chaos will pulse protection to nearby allies. Having protection is going to make your group content so much easier. When you consume it, you'll knock back enemies, deal a nice chunk of damage, and grant super speed to nearby allies. This will be used as part of your damage rotation, however, you can adjust the timing of it for when you need to CC an enemy. In Shiro, Enchanted Daggers will summon 6 daggers which siphon health from targets that you hit. Riposting Shadows will grant you a backwards evade, remove all movement impairing conditions, and grant you fury. Phased Reversal will port you towards your target, make your attacks unblockable, and grant you quickness. Impossible Odds is the main skill you're going to be using while in Shiro. You'll gain a 50% movement speed increase, and deal an additional strike to enemies you hit. This is just a straight up DPS increase. It also costs 6 points of upkeep to maintain, so when you have Impossible Odds active, you'll pulse quickness to nearby allies. Jade Winds is a huge AoE stun, but does cost a huge amount of energy. Still, it's useful if you really need to crank some CC. In Jealous, Soothing Stone will remove conditions and heal you. You'll also gain Resolution, which will reduce incoming condition damage by 33%. Inspiring Reinforcement lays down a yellow brick road and offers amazing group-wide stability. This is the main reason you're going to want to take Jealous on certain encounters. Forced Engagement taunts enemies, gives breakbar damage through soft CC, and reduces the amount of damage you take from taunted enemies. Vengeful Hammers basically replaces Impossible Odds from the Shiro stuns. It also reduces strike and condi damage you take by 20%. Outstanding. Like Impossible Odds, this skill costs 6 points of upkeep, so you can pulse quickness while you're in Jealous now. Rite of the Great Dwarf is rather expensive, but it breaks stuns for 5 people and gives your team a massive 50% damage reduction for 5 seconds. If you know there's going to be some high damage pressure coming in shortly, this is a very good skill to have on hand. Shiro and Jealous are your 2 main legend swaps for this build. However, there are some useful skills in other legends for niche situations. In Ventari, Protective Solace is an absurdly long-lasting projectile barrier that you can move around. Again, it's also 6 points of upkeep, so you can pulse quickness with it as well. In Malix, Banish Enchantment provides boon removal, which is super nice for fractals when the no pain, no gain instability makes an appearance. Call to Anguish pulls mobs you land on together for you and your team to burst down, which is very handy. Now, onto our traits. The traits for Power Quickness Herald are relatively simple. We basically have a whole bunch of damage modifiers and one trait that lets us apply quickness. As is common for most Revenant power damage builds, the Devastation line is loaded up with damage modifiers to crank out damage. Unsuspecting Strikes will deal increased damage to foes above 80% health. Destructive Impulses will simply give you a flat 5% damage increase, with an additional 2.5% damage increase if you have an offhand weapon equipped. Luckily for us, we're going to be using offhand sword. Notoriety will cause your might to grant you more power and less condition damage. It will also grant you might when using one of your utility skills. Targeted destruction will cause you to deal increased strike damage the more vulnerability stacks you have on an opponent. With 25 vulnerability, this comes out to an extra 12.5% strike damage. Swift Termination is a massive damage modifier and causes you to deal 20% extra strike damage to enemies below 50% health. If you need a bit of extra survivability, you can swap out Swift Termination for Dance of Death. In most group content, this isn't needed, however. Invocation is basically here for some damage modifiers and extra boon access. Rising Tide will grant you an extra 10% strike damage when your health is above 75%. Ferocious Aggression will simply give you an extra 10% damage whenever you have Fury. Spirit Boon will cause you to grant boons to nearby allies whenever you swap legend. The boons change depending on which legend, but in this case the most important boons are Might when you swap to Shiro, Stability when you swap to Jalas, and Protection whenever you swap to Glint. Roiling Miss is a staple on all Power Revenant builds, and causes Fury to grant you 50% extra crit chance instead of 25%. This makes it insanely easy for Herald to reach 100% crit chance, which is amazing for a power build. The Herald trait line is obviously needed and makes the entire build function. Core Value improves the effect of our True Nature skill when we consume Facet of Nature. This is most often used when we run Glint to extend the duration of our allies' boons by 3 seconds instead of the standard 2 seconds. Shared Empowerment will allow you to apply might to nearby allies whenever you grant them boons. This also applies to yourself as well. This trait lets you keep up approximately 20 might stacks on your subgroup, which is absolutely outstanding. Reinforced Potency you get for free as a minor trait and gives you extra concentration and lets you deal additional damage depending on the number of active boons you have. So this is just extra boon duration and damage for free. Elevated Compassion is the only trait change you'll need to make from our previous Herald build guide, so no more Draconic Echo. ArenaNet has basically taken everything that is pure and good in this world and added it to this trait. Whenever you're maintaining more than 6 points of upkeep, so whenever your energy is constantly decreasing, you'll pulse quickness in an insane 600 radius. Every second, you'll pulse 1.25 seconds of quickness. So even if you have 0% extra boon duration, permanent quickness. It also converts 13% of your power into concentration, because why not? This means that even in full Berserker gear, you're rocking almost 40% boon duration. So no issue at all keeping up disgusting levels of boons.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
You'll also heal allies whenever you apply a boon. So just free healing every second for your entire team. Sure, we'll take it. One important thing is that Elevated Compassion just makes Shared Empowerment even better. Every second, you're now applying boons, so that means even more might for your team. With that, it's time for our gear and food. With the changes to Herald, you can now just run full Berserker's gear in every slot. No need for any extra boon duration at all. To truly min-max, you can run a Dragon's Back piece so you don't overcap on crit chance. For runes, we're going to take Rune of the Scholar. We don't need any extra boon duration, and we just want to crank our power damage as much as possible. For our sigils, we'll be taking Sigil of Force and Air. For food, take whichever variant of sous vide steak you prefer, or any other power and ferocity food, the non-ascended alternative being sweet and spicy butternut squash. For our utility, just take Superior Sharpening Stone, easy peasy. With that, it's time for the rotation. I find the rotation for Power Quickness Herald changes a bit as the fight progresses due to your skill cooldowns getting more and more out of sync. So today we'll go through what the ideal loop is, as well as some of the rules of thumb that will help you adapt your rotation as the fight goes on. Personally, I don't find this particularly complicated, it's just that you need to be a bit flexible. For our opener, start by activating Facet of Strength, Elements, Darkness, and Nature. Consume Facet of Nature, Elements, then Strength. Activate and consume Facet of Chaos. Swap to Shiro. In Shiro, immediately activate Impossible Odds. Use Sword 2, Sword 4, Sword 5. Use 2 auto attack chains. Sword 2 again. 3 auto attack chains. Swap back to Glint. In Glint, we'll start by activating and consuming both Facet of Elements and Strength. Activate Facet of Darkness, Sword 2, Sword 4, Sword 5, use 2 auto attack chains, activate Facet of Nature and Facet of Chaos, Sword 2, use 2 auto attack chains, consume both Facet of Chaos and Nature, activate and consume both Facet of Elements and Strength, swap back to Shiro. Repeat this until you've received your loot. For some quick rules to adapt your rotation, we'll want to maximize our uptime of the Facet of Strength buff, so we'll use it at the start and the end of each Glint loop. Facet of Strength and Elements have the same cooldown, so pair them up. Generally, you'll want to use Sword 2, 4, and 5 off cooldown, and try not to interrupt your sword auto attack chains. And that, my friends, is Quickness Herald, what is, in my opinion, the best offensive quickness build in Guild Wars 2 right now. Today, in full Berserker gear, you're rocking 40% boon duration. You can easily provide permanent quickness, not to mention grant your team 20 stacks of might, fury, swiftness, protection, regeneration, and vigor. You've got the simple Herald playstyle we all know and love. You're insanely durable with built-in evades, blocks, and the incredible Herald heal skill, not to mention the insane levels of CC that Revenants become blessed with. This build has everything you could possibly want to carry your team kicking and screaming to victory. There is no reason you shouldn't be playing this build. So get to it, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's masterclass on everything Quickness Herald. Leave a like if you enjoyed this guide, and come check out our Discord if you have any questions about Herald or any other builds in Guild Wars 2. And with that, I'll catch you all next time. Cheers.